It'll be one of the largest dams in the world when complete, providing water for millions of Ethiopians. But downstream, Egypt and Sudan say they'll suffer. And despite talks, the three countries can't agree on a deal. So, what next? A military confrontation? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. The African Union has, for months, tried to mediate between Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan. But despite its efforts, the dispute about Addis Ababa's construction of a giant hydroelectric dam on the Blue Nile remains unresolved. Downstream, Cairo and Khartoum say the issue could threaten peace and security in the region and ask the UN Security Council to intervene before the situation escalates. But the fringe envoy to the UN says the world body lacks the legal expertise and there is little it can do. He's called on the three countries to go back to the negotiating table, though the Security Council does plan to meet next week to discuss the crisis. Egypt relies on the Nile for up to 90% of its freshwater supply and fears the dam could affect the flow. While Sudan is worried the multi-billion-dollar project could damage its own reservoirs and water stations. Ethiopia says the dam is crucial to its economic development and will provide electricity to millions of Ethiopians. Egypt and Sudan are seeking a binding agreement on the filling of the dam and its operations, while Ethiopia plans to go forward with the second filling of the reservoirs before any deal is reached. The dispute centers mainly on how quickly Ethiopia should fill the dam and how much water it would release. Cairo and Khartoum have called on the US and EU to intervene and last month rallied Arab countries to support their bid at the UN. Addis Ababa has rejected the involvement of mediators outside the African Union and was concerned about joint military drills carried out by Egypt and Sudan in May. The dispute between Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia dates back to 2011 when Ethiopia started building the dam. The three countries signed a declaration of principles in 2015 that takes into consideration concerns of the parties involved. But differences remain on technical issues despite several rounds of talks. The African Union got involved last year after Ethiopia started the first phase of filling the dam. The latest AU-led talks between Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan in April ended with no progress made. Last month, Cairo and Khartoum called on the international community to intervene ahead of Ethiopia's second filling of the dam. All right, let's bring in our guests. Joining us on Zoom from Swindon, UK, Mohammed Girma, a visiting lecturer at the University of Roehampton. In Cairo, Nader Noureddin, professor of soil sciences and water resources at Cairo University. And in Khartoum, Sadiq Sharfi, professor of engineering faculty at the University of Khartoum. A warm welcome to you all. Nader, let me start with you today. So Egypt and Sudan have both asked the UN Security Council to take up the issue of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. What is the likelihood at this stage that the UN Security Council will actually be able to resolve this dispute?
Hello. My greeting for you and for your guest. Number one, in the international law of the United Nations for transboundary rivers belongs to the United Nations, not to the African Union. And this is number one, why Egypt and Sudan go to the UN Security Council. Number two, there is many irregularities from Ethiopia in the international law of transboundary rivers. And there is also, you can say, a cause of harm, not cause of a significant harm from Ethiopia to both Egypt and Sudan. And this is why Egypt asked the Security Council to discuss its complaint about the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, about its irregularities from the international law of the transboundary rivers.
Mohammed, let me ask you, Ethiopia, it's well known, has not been too keen on the involvement of the UN Security Council. They've rejected calls from Egypt and Sudan to involve mediators outside of the African Union. What is the reason for that stance?
First of all, thank you for your invitation. One of the reasons is we are at a stage where the African Union is coming of age and maturing in mediating and solving the African problem. So Ethiopia thinks there is no for the UN or non-African agency at this moment to inject themselves or to impose themselves on this issue. Both Egypt and Ethiopia are located in Africa, and they share the union. So that union should be given a chance in order to be able to mediate this problem. That is good for the African identity. That is good also the African leaders to come up with an African solution.
Sadiq, why have African Union-sponsored talks failed to produce results so far?
First of all, I would like to thank you for your invitation and greetings to you and the audience of Al Jazeera and the other colleagues participating in this presentation. If you look at the sequence along which these negotiations were taking place, when it came to the African Union were not at all prepared for such a negotiation. There was never before any negotiations concerning water issues. The African Union was not prepared to lead the negotiation. We're not having any plan to lead the negotiation. Secondly, the first filling took place, and the African Union did not even take any decision or any announcement. So this is why we believe that the African Union is failing to lead this negotiation. The third thing is that the Ethiopians were asking some of the African experts in the meetings not to give any opinion or comments on the negotiations. So Ethiopians were dominating, and the African Union is installed in Ethiopia. So for all these reasons, it was not an easy for the African Union, which is not prepared and will not be prepared for any negotiations.
Nader,
it's never carried out such a negotiation.
Nader, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has warned that all options are open when it comes to the dispute over the Renaissance Dam. How likely is it that Egypt would exercise a military option?
It's very common. Even the Ethiopia insists of this or its hard situation about the failed negotiation for 10 years. He said we will not able and willing to continue negotiation forever. And so far we have more than 10 years of failed negotiation, and this is may take or may develop the water conflict to be a water war. This will be the first water war in the world, because Ethiopia doesn't want to give any guarantee or guarantee any amount of water for Egypt and Sudan from the Blue Nile. When we ask Ethiopia, the Blue Nile is already shared in Union Nile by 50 billion cubic meter a year. What's after the construction of Renaissance Dam? How much water can Ethiopia guarantee for Egypt and Sudan from this is 49 billion cubic meter? Ethiopia say nothing. Even a 40 billion, even a 45, they say nothing. And they insist about that. That means Ethiopia wanted to govern and to control everything about the Blue Nile water and not guarantee for Egypt for any amount of water for future planes and all the sectors that needs water in Egypt, agriculture sector, industry, and home also. And so many problem between the negotiator of Egyptian and Sudan in one side and the Ethiopian in other side. No guarantee for any amount of water, no approvement for how much water you may fill each year and how many years we may also make a dealing about that, and how much water we will decrease or will deducted from the Blue Nile water. We don't know anything. Ethiopia wanted to control everything.
Mohammed, is there any chance at this stage that some kind of a roadmap for further negotiations could be drawn up before Ethiopia goes ahead and fills the reservoir for the second time?
First of all, let me address this military comment that my colleague and yourself made. I think both Ethiopia and Egypt, or even Sudan, should be wise enough to avoid that kind of military intervention to that. Because it is very unlikely that anybody would get something that they did not get through negotiation by military intervention. As far as the Ethiopian position is concerned, the Ethiopian government has time and again mentioned that this project does not harm the other countries who are sharing the Nile, including the Egypt. So Ethiopia also, as a country that produces about more than 85% of the Nile water, has the right to work towards its development and to develop this dam. So any kind of roadmap that could be drawn depends on the political will from these three countries, basically. I think there needs to be that kind of openness rather than stretching the argument, stretching the conversation to different kind of extreme would not yield any positive result.
Sadiq, Ethiopian officials have said that they are in full accordance with the 2015 Declaration of Principles when it comes to the dam. One of its terms is that any call for four international players to mediate, that would have to be agreed to by all three countries. In that sense, when you factor that into consideration, doesn't it sort of become pointless to involve the UN Security Council at this stage?
Well, I would like to say to our Ethiopian colleague, we should face facts as they are facts. First of all, they are putting the negotiation instead of benefit share to water resource share. In that sense, if you look at the Declaration of Principles of 2015, Ethiopia did not comply till now with any obligations concerning the study for the safety of the dam, or any study concerning the environmental hazard and the impact on all the civilization of floodplains in Sudan. So Ethiopia is not complying with 2015. They're just giving lies. Sorry for the word. But let me explain one thing. Ethiopians used to tell that they do not consider the colonial period agreement. Then why they accept the boundaries agreement? The other thing is that Ethiopia tells lies when they say Sudan and Egypt consume all the Blue Nile waters. To state it as a fact, Ethiopia has 120 million people living in Ethiopia, and a similar number maybe of animals, more than 1 million. Ethiopians cultivate, take water for irrigation. They generate hydropower from Dekasi, from Tana Palace, and so on. They use water from Lake Tana for irrigation. They are living with all this amount of water. Actually, what remains as an excess from the Ethiopian rainfall is led to Sudan. So why they tell lies by telling people that Ethiopia is not having any share? Unless Ethiopia want to cut this amount of water that used to come after Ethiopians have consumed all the benefits. So they should consider this, and I think all of the world know this as a fact. So Ethiopia is taking the negotiation towards water share rather than benefit share. And I don't think Ethiopians are ready now for any agreement, because they want to keep this order of negotiation with the African Union, and they don't agree to any other place. As I said, the African Union is really weak. We have seen South Africa
Sadiq,
negotiators.
I'm sorry to
Yes.
interrupt you. Let me get back to you about that point that you're starting to make about the African Union, because we are starting to run out of time. I wanted to ask Nader, because you had expressed in your last answer, concern, which is the Egyptian point of view of how quickly the dam will be filled and how that would affect Egypt. Without a binding agreement on filling and operating the dam with Sudan and Egypt, if Ethiopia goes ahead and fills the dam for a second time, what happens next?
Look, for the second field of Ethiopia, from decision of Ethiopian side only, without any agreement with Egypt and Sudan, for example, it decided to fill this year about 13.5 billion cubic meter. This is enough to irrigate about 3 million acres in Egypt. And that means 3 million acres of cultivated land will be affected. And about 15 million persons work in this 3 million acre will be affected also. And this is what we call, this is a suddenly fill without agreement, because he said make sure that if Egypt have another source to use instead of this 13.5 of the second field of the Renaissance Dam or not. If we have enough water in Aswan High Dam reservoir, that will be good. But Ethiopia doesn't know that, and that's what we say. We should have an agreement about each refill, and it is not likely to be an Ethiopian side decision only, but we should have an agreement. And the same thing for the Sudan. Also, it will have much of lack of water according to this high amount of reservoir, 13.5 billion cubic meter, and even the total reservoir of the Renaissance dam is so much from upstream country. For example, if you take a Turkey country, as this is what Ethiopia believed in so much, or the godfather of Ethiopia, the Ataturk Great Dam is its reservoir is only 48 billion. The another one in Elisio Dam in Degla River is only 10 billion. But Ethiopia planned to store 75 billion cubic meter in Renaissance Dam reservoir, and this is so much for Egypt and Sudan to be tolerant, and thus we should make it is a long time for 10 years, for example, and we should also make an agreement, and we should listen to Sudan and Egypt how much water you need during these years, and how much affected this reservoir will affect Egypt and Sudan. But there is no, this is not sounded very well in Ethiopia, and it is only need to be the solo decision. And he said this year I will make a storage of 13.5, next year 18.5 without any agreement with Sudan and Egypt, and this is not fair.
I'm sorry to interrupt you as well, but I do want to throw a question Mohammed's way. Mohammed, I want to talk for a second about some of the complicating factors for Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, because, things seem to be further complicated by all the international pressure that he is under because of the conflict in Tigray. How much more difficult does that make all of this? Does that make this dispute over the Renaissance Dam, the fact that this conflict is going on and the fact that he's under so much pressure?
The problem, the existing problem in Ethiopia, and then additional pressure that is coming from the international community. Also, the negotiation of the dam has a kind of a double effect, probably sometimes opposite effects on the local Ethiopian politics, especially with regards to the prime minister. For one, Ethiopians are united when it comes to the dam, regardless of the domestic politics, which is very much polarized. In fact, the more pressure comes from the international community, from Egypt, from other powers on the dam, it is sort of a factor that drives more support domestically to the Ethiopian Prime Minister. So I think the problem is that there is a worry from the population that Egypt might use the internal fragility for its own advantage by sort of supporting the rebellious elements within the Ethiopian politics. That is a worry. There is no kind of tangible, concrete evidence for that. Other than that, yes, the pressure that is coming from the Nile politics might add a little bit, but it has got also its own advantage.
Sadiq, let me ask you, what about this border dispute between Sudan and Ethiopia? How much is that complicating the overall situation when it comes to negotiations over the dam?
I think this is a completely different issue. Just I have some few words to tell about the Gerd dam. Ethiopians are trying to keep all data. By controlling the data, they are not giving Sudan, which has its own dams very close to the border, and the size of Sudanese dams are very small compared to Gerd. They are not giving any information concerning the amount of water they are retaining. Remark what they have done last year when they kept this almost 5 billion cubic meters, where Sudan has suffered a lot in drinking water and water for irrigation and hydropower. Now we are suffering from hydropower because we are not producing hydropower because we don't know what Ethiopians are going to do with the amount of water flowing towards Sudan. So I don't know what's secret in not developing this data. Is it that secret? So I think Ethiopia is not giving Sudan the confidence, so we cannot be confident with Ethiopians with their strength to hide this simple information about the dam heightening and that the amount of water that they may be retaining for this period. So for any negotiations, there should be a minimum of confidence. Concerning your other question about the official dispute, I think there was no dispute. This was an agreement of the borders. And if Ethiopians believe in the African Union has said it clear, we should respect all the boundaries from the colonial period. Otherwise, we have documents showing that part of this dam area now, were at a certain period of time, were belonging to Sudan. So if you refuse the agreement, then more confusion will take place. I think the dispute is that these farmers used to come to Sudan and they used to rent the land since the 60s, and they pay for the Sudanese owners. And then later on, after 84, when there was this drought, huge amount of people came there and installed. So Sudan was welcoming all these people coming from the famine in Ethiopia. And since then, these people were installed. They were constructing, they were building. Sometimes they said they were supported by this Shifta group of gangs who used to kill and steal whatever they find from Sudanese farmers. So they want to take most of the land for their agriculture. So my belief is that this is a Sudanese land. There is no dispute, nothing about it. So who believes that there are disputes? I think this is what is happening in Ethiopia between the Amhara and the Tigray. The Amhara used to cultivate this land by renting it, and now they want to have their share.
All right, we've run out of time, so we're going to have to leave our conversation there. Thanks so much to all of our guests, Mohammed Girma, Nader Nuruddin, and Sadiq Sharfi. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.